Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ from the Coaches Panel. Welcome back to another episode of the 50 Most Relevant, where I count our way through who I think are the most relevant players for us to consider in SuperCoach, DreamTeam and AFL Fantasy for 2022. We put them all into a big melting pot so that if you do play multiple of the formats, there's relevant players for you to look at across every single day. Joining me on this podcast episode, the 2020 Dream Team champion. I got Rids back. Hello, mate. How are you?
Hey, mate. How you going?
I'm good. I'm really intrigued to talk about this guy. The reason I wanted to get you on, because 2020 was certainly that year. You had a great year in Dream Team, winning the entirety of the competition. But in that year, Brayden Maynard, who we're looking about in this episode, was phenomenal. But with a new coach, new game style, and a rumoured new role, he could be an interesting player for us to look at. Let's deep dive, though, before we get into any of that, into some of the numbers from last year. As a defender eligible option, he gave us a really strong couple of scores across the formats last year. He gave us a career high SuperCoach score against the Ds. It was a 142, while it was a 133 in that same game for AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. It's not a career high score for him in that format, though. That was a 144 back in 2018 against the Dockers. A 92.3 is his SuperCoach average, which we'll see him priced at $502,500, while in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, an average of 81.4. And in those formats, he'll set you back just over 680K in AFL Fantasy and just a touch under 700,000 in Dream Team. And Rids, after hitting the premium heights of being one of the best kind of surprising premium defenders of 2020, coaches might have been a little bit disappointed with his 2021 year, but he still had some very important games from a footballing sense for Collingwood and some good scores for us as fantasy coaches to go along the year.
Now, I know you love your stats on previous seasons and everything else, but I'm going to tell everyone listening to this podcast.
It doesn't matter.
Throw it in the bin.
It doesn't matter.
This guy has got nothing to do with 2020. 2021 is the interesting thing for me, okay?
Yeah.
He actually was this year he's the 25th highest average player, defender, in our back lines to choose from.
In AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, yeah.
Yeah, and in SuperCoach,
he's 21st.
21st. That's all you need to know, okay? Now, the second part of this is he has been rumoured for this midfield role that he has been whinging and complaining and begging. He just wants to play midfield. Okay, That's point 2. That's all you need to know for now.
That's all you need to know.
Point 3, forget all your research, forget everything. Point 3, there's a guy called Jordan De Goey he was playing in the midfield last year.
He was.
Now,
I did all right.
Just in case you have been living under a rock or you haven't followed the news, he got himself into a little bit of trouble over in America. Now, there is a chance, a little bit. There is a chance that he may or may not play again this year.
Yes.
We don't know what's going up. It's all up in the air, okay? So that's point 3. Point 4, new coach.
Mm-hmm.
So I know the preseason cup's been called absolutely everything over the last 20 years. I mean, it was the Alphabet Cup, it was some other cup, it was this cup.
Ansett, everybody's had a chance at it, mate.
I'm designating this 2022 preseason cup as the Brayden Maynard Cup.
Ooh.
All we want to do is watch Collingwood preseason games, okay? That's all we want to do, whether it's 1 game, 2 games, 3 games, half a game, whatever. Just watch the preseason. If this guy starts in the centre square, it doesn't even look like venturing back, just start him. That's all I'm saying across all the formats.
Yep.
Because he's room for scope. And I know we're going to get into the numbers of 40s and how many 30s and 40s and 50s he scored over the last
Yeah, it's irrelevant, though, if he has the midfield role.
The thing is, in that midfield role, if he's already around the top 20, 25 for the position already, there's only room and scope to go up. Okay.
Correct.
Start the guy. If you need to make a mistake and you need to trade him out after 2 or 3 games because the preseason cup or the Brayden Maynard cup has confused us and tricked us with fool's gold, well, we just go down to the lowest, the best performing.
The value guy around that you missed or whatever, yeah.
The one with the biggest negative break even at that point in time after 2 games in the limited format, or in the AFL, you just go straight away in AFL fantasy. So don't second guess this. If he starts in the centre square in the preseason cup, the Brayden Maynard cup, you have to start this guy. Because at 700,000 or 680,000, around that ballpark in AFL fantasy and
DT, just over 500 in SuperCoach,
Yeah, you have to start him because there is no better option in the back line if he does play midfield.
And one of the things that really fascinates me as people look at Brayden Maynard as an option this year is they forget, or maybe not even forget, don't see why Collingwood pursue him there. They see the defensive work that he's done for so many years and go, why would Collingwood and McRae choose to lose that there? And maybe there's some point to that, but these are some things that he offers this Collingwood midfield that I think even Magpie fans, let alone generic football fans, would agree is a need for them. He offers two-way work rate through that midfield. He offers pressure on the ball carrier. He's got some really clean skills, especially off that left boot. And he's got a nice turn of pace from really congested moments. And he's a really smart footballer. And what Collingwood have at the moment is this weird imbalance through their midfield where they've got the old school guys in Sidebottom and Pendlebury who are still skilled, who are still smart, but are certainly lacking a turn of pace as they look to rebuild outside of Maynard and a bunch of kids that we covered on the Jordan DeGoey podcast, which you and I were on for, Rids. The only other option outside of Maynard for a staple of this midfield is an impending court case about Jordan DeGoey. And the day that this is being released is the day that we will find out, at least from a court perspective, what the ruling is. Nothing beyond that from the AFL. And then the other is Taylor Adams, who I love as a player, but is made of paper mache. And so the confidence that from a pure footballing sense, not just fantasy, but from a pure footballing sense, is it could very, very quickly, it only can be Maynard. That's the way you get there. I suppose the question some might have, and I'm keen on your take on this, Rids, is if we rewind ourselves back 12 months ago, there was a Sydney Swan by the name of Callum Mills who developed himself into being a really valuable defender for his team, was then training through the midfield, but fantasy coaches were hesitant to go there because they'd heard about the rumored move before, but never felt there was this sense of trust that in game he wouldn't get moved, or if it didn't work after a week or two, he wouldn't get moved. What's your thought process to coaches or response to that for coaches to go, oh, yeah, but he could just be the reverse of what Mills does? What would you say to a coach who thinks that?
So there's two things to that. There's a guy called John Longmire, okay?
Yeah.
He doesn't coach Collingwood. So let's just leave that. Now, Collingwood's got a new coach. So that new coach has got pretty much a year of freedom to try new things, swap things out. I reckon if he starts in the preseason in the centre square, that means that's where he's going to play the large majority early games for Collingwood.
Yeah.
And as soon as he moves away, you just trade him out and you go somewhere else. Because at his value, he's going to average 80 anyway as a defender, yeah?
So, he went 80 last Dream Team in fantasy, 92 in Supercoach. So at worst, he holds.
There's another guy that me and you spent a bit of time on a podcast a little while ago called Rory Laird for Adelaide as well.
Yeah.
Now, look at these guys and their averages. They spiked and jumped up when they did go in the midfield.
Yeah.
I tell you now, Brayden Maynard, sorry. It's a bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah, come on.
The fact is, okay, he's as tough as they come. He really is tough. He's 25. I like when you think about it, he's just turned 25. He's going to be 25 for pretty much the majority of the 2022 season.
Yeah.
that's something you could build a midfielder around, especially if you've got guys like the Dacos brothers and a few of those other young fellas,
McRae, Poulter,
You know, that's something you can actually build. And I think I mentioned this with Mills a couple of days ago, was you can actually build around these guys because they're at the right age. This guy, I just don't see any reason why you doubt any of that, okay? So just use your eyes, log on to the Maynard Cup, okay, and just watch the game or games that he plays through that.
Yeah.
If he starts in the centre square and doesn't look like going back, just lock him in.
Yeah, exactly.
Just throw away the key.
Intra-club matches aren't going to help you in your analysis here because they've got to have a doubling up of every position. So he'll play through the midfield in intras. It's the practice games. It's the Alphabet Cup. It's the Maynard Cup that you've dubbed it as. If he's midfield, you lock it in because the upside is you jumped on this year's Mills and Laird. The downside is he holds as a 90 or SuperCoach defender or a low 80 in DT and fantasy. And that's, again, this is the worst case scenario. You burn a trade or you just hold him and upgrade him post-buy and he won't be that horrific for you. Remember last year in AFL Fantasy and DreamTeam, his best score of the year was a 133. In SuperCoach, he gave you a career high 142 last year. There were multiple tons last year, 5 of them in DT and fantasy. 4 of them over 115, 10 tons in SuperCoach last year. Again, all playing off the back line and a largely accountable Smalls role. So if that's what he's doing there, and if he moves into the midfield, the sky's the limit. Because Rids, the way I read the back line, and we'll talk, I'm keen on your take, and then we'll look at drafts in a sec. Outside of Hall, Lloyd, and Whitfield, there's probably not anybody else on first glance that you go, yeah, I feel like they could be a 110 guy across the formats. Well, some might pump in others or pop in others, but these are the guys that feel like they've got the history or the ceiling to be able to go, yeah, they're there. So the risks you can take in the back line, I feel like that's the area of the season where it could be one and done for us. Maynard just looks to me like one of the easiest picks of the year if he plays through that midfield. Because I don't see a world where he doesn't push that 100 barrier if he's playing through that midfield.
Well, let's throw some names out there, okay?
Sure.
Hall. Now, 100% if Hall is fit for the season, and we're going to, same rule for everyone, okay? If they've got to be fit for the season.
Sure.
And they've got to keep the same position role as what they did last year. Hall, no one's going to beat Hall, okay, average-wise across the board.
If that role and fit, no.
It's just we've seen 1 year of it. So, I mean, whether you have that trust at very maximum pay dollar,
sure,
I don't know. Now, we go to the next one. Let's go Jack Crisp, okay, off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Now, whether we see him or not in the next few, weeks off the top 50 who knows? But the fact is, he is durable. Yes. He absolutely plays every week. So straight away, you've got a contrast, don't you? You've got a guy they've both got massive ceilings if they play the right role. Yeah, Crisp is durable. Hall is, so-so to a point.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we go down to the next ones. Let's go to the next one. Zeeble. Okay. Zeeble, second half of last year, he didn't really play the same role as he did in the first half. He
regressed as the year went on. Yeah.
100%. He wasn't attacking. He's going to play more accountable football if he maintains that back role this year. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Sam Doherty. We all know the plights that Sam Doherty's had.
We can't, unfortunately, pick him. Yep.
You just can't go there.
No.
Daniel Rich, hot and cold. Yep. Jaden Short, hot and cold.
There's a world for Maynard. Yeah.
I mean, who are you actually going to be really selecting with any confidence that's not Jake Lloyd?
Yeah.
Is my whole question is with Jake Lloyd, you've got, I could probably argue Dawson's no there anymore to impact him.
Sure.
He's, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. But outside of that, who are we 100% convinced is going to actually stay on the park week in, week out and do what we need to do? So there is a world here where there's not many that go over 90,
certainly in DreamTeam and fantasy, agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So, if someone like a Maynard who's already going 80 in those formats and has got history of 90 the year before, playing a different role, goes into the midfield,
Yeah.
oh, you just got to absolutely jump on board, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. And for me, I think you summed it up beautifully almost near the start. If this rumoured and trained role eventuates into the practice and the Maynard Cup, just lock him in. Because,
don't overthink it.
The eject button is easy if it goes pear-shaped. But where the club is at, what McRae is trying to do, what the ingredients around it, if they've trained him all year and they play him through the preseason, there is no reason for that to abort for them. And so for me, I'm with you. If those variables go, you lock him in. And if they don't, you don't start. You look elsewhere. And that's why where he's in the 50 most relevant. Because the upside of the ifs mean he could go to the absolute moon. The ifs, if it goes against him, means he'll still be a good option for us this year, but probably not someone that you're hoping to land in your squad at some point, unless he becomes serious value in the year. Let's talk about where he goes on draft grids. I'm really interested. Like he's top 25 defender across the formats, 21st in SuperCoach, 25 in Ultimates footy scoring. So by average, he's probably going to get picked up as someone's D3, but the hype around him at the moment probably means someone that wants to own Maynard rather than have him fall to them. You're probably going to have to jump for him at a D2 style selection, won't you?
Well, I would actually go even further than that.
Yeah,
I was trying to work out who the D1 options are in the back line. So you got Hall, you got Chris, Lloyd, you got Whitfield. So
Sure.
they're the first four, and I'd say Heppel, okay, if you throw Heppel in as
Yeah,
well.
and then in SuperCoach, you can add Rich, Stewart, and a bunch of other guys too, where they get kind of bumped in that format.
I would be thinking Maynard, if you've got a 10-team league or a 12-team league or a 16-team league, Maynard's a D1.
It could very well be.
He's right on the borderline. If he gets that role and he goes 90 plus, you're looking at a D1. Now, if you could pick him up at a D2 selection, and he ends up being your D1, you're miles ahead of everyone else.
Absolutely.
So I would actually be thinking, look, you don't want to go too early on him because at the end of the day, there is still that risk that he goes back into the back line in draft. Like say when they play Richmond, like he's a perfect matchup for a Dustin Martin.
Yes, he is.
So one-on-one contest down back, you'd be thinking, okay, he's going to go play a lot of football on Dusty then. So there are going to be those occasions where he does go back. But having said that, you don't want to sleep on him either. If you can pick him up, I'm just trying to say with your 4th, 5th, 6th selection, depending how the draft goes.
Sure.
You are absolutely, and he's your D2 behind Hall, Crisp, Heppel, Ty.
Any of those guys, yeah.
Yeah, I just think, you know what? He is really, really one of those awkward ones to pick because there are going to be hypes about him.
There will be.
People will jump him. And because he plays in Collingwood too, they're all crazy.
They love him too. Look, round 8 is when Richmond played Collingwood, so it's interesting. The other avenue you could go with Maynard is if you don't love the backline this year, you can still target him as a D1, but you pick him where others are picking their D2, and you're loading up through that midfield. You're loading up through that forward line, wherever it is. So that's the other avenue you can approach it to, of going, I'm picking my D1 at a spot of a D2. And if it flies, it flies. And if it doesn't, okay, you might have a lower volume of defenders, but the defender and the forward line, every week you're going to pick up a 75 off the waivers. There's always something in the waiver wire through there. And I actually don't mind the depth of the defensive line in contrast to the forward line. So for me, there's multiple ways you can look at him, and he's a fascinating player. He will be one of the most watched players in the preseason because if the ifs line up the way we hope and do want them to, we could have an absolute ripping pick in 2022.
Hey, exactly right, mate, because you got guys like Trent Rivers and Nick Blakeslee and all these guys, Ethan Hughes,
just late.
They're just going to be
Tucker, late.
They're going to be late all the time.
Every time.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, mate. So you just got to I really do believe defensive line is the sleeper line a little bit in drafts at the moment, where you've got to go a little bit early to get your D1, so you're locking that real recognised
The big dog, yeah.
Whitfield type, Hall, but then you can actually sleep all the way down and work through it. Now, if Maynard ends up being your D1 and you get someone like, let's just say Williams or Sicily or someone like that, it pay at D2 and D3, I mean, you're looking pretty solid, I think.
You could end up with a Maynard at D1, just using players in the 50 most relevant, Sicily at a D2, and George Hewitt at D3, who all have now there's headaches potentially galore in that combo, but there's also an 85 plus across the formats to 95 across the format variables. So you're right. I think that's the line where you can have some fun this year. That is for sure, man. Appreciate your work today on the podcast though, mate.
Yeah, no worries. And enjoy the Maynard Cup, people.
Yes, it's going to be dubbed that from the coaches panel throughout the rest of this preseason. So enjoy it. If you want to go and read the article on Brayden, it is all available for you now at coachespanel.tv. All the links for all the other players revealed so far. Make sure you go and check that out. If you're loving these podcasts, make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review. It's one of the ways you can support the coaches panel and also help others know about us this preseason. And if you do want these podcasts 24 hours early, then you can jump in at our breakout or premium tier levels as a Patreon, and you'll get these 24 hours early. Yep, they already know who Louis and I are talking about tomorrow on the 50 most relevant. That's maybe I could give a better clue than Louis on. It's a player that if you go back and look through Louis' Twitter history, which is at Louis AF for AFL Fantasy, by the way, he talked about this guy a lot at points last year. Who is he? I'll tell you tomorrow in the 50 most relevant.